Welcome to Preeminent Test Prep. Today I'll be beginning a 90-day SAT preparation series put out for free by a 1590 SAT score. So I scored 1590 on the SAT in September of 2020, and I'll be creating a 90-day course to help you prepare for the SAT and hopefully improve your score. So if you're going to study for the SAT, there should be a why behind it. You should know your reason. So just like if you were going to do anything, you want to know why you're going to study for the SAT. So one reason to study for the SAT is acceptance to colleges. A higher SAT score is going to improve your chances of being admitted to colleges, and that includes Ivy League schools, local state schools, and community colleges. So it's definitely not just going to get you in on its own. You have to have other things around it if you're applying to a top school, but it will certainly improve your chances of being accepted into any college. And not just any college, but if you're applying to a local state school, it can also help you get into the honors college at a state school. So for example, Michigan State, they have an honors college, and a higher SAT score would help you get into that honors college. So that would help you graduate with honors, which is another good thing as far as employment and career advancement. So another reason to study for the SAT is scholarships. So when you think about scholarships, most people think about merit-based scholarships from colleges. And the SAT will help you get merit scholarships from public colleges and some private colleges. So the SAT is definitely a big factor in attaining those merit scholarships from academic institutions. But it's also a factor in attaining scholarships from institutions that are charitable organizations, or if your parents, some employers, so say your parents are employed by a company like General Motors or some other large company, and I'm not saying General Motors has this, but some large companies have scholarship programs for the sons and daughters of their employees. So this would also put you ahead of the competition if you have a high SAT score and applying for those types of scholarships. So you're talking about scholarships from outside organizations, charitable organizations, and the schools and colleges themselves that you're applying to as far as requiring or taking standardized testing as a way to measure who should receive scholarship money. So it's definitely a big part of that, and it's worth thousands of dollars in merit scholarships if you can get a high SAT score. So to start, I'm going to give you a bit of my background and my SAT story, if you will. So basically just kind of how I got my 1590 on the SAT, what my scores were throughout high school on the PSAT, what I studied, what I didn't study, all of that, to give you a better idea of who will be helping you to study for the SAT, what kind of background they have, and what they recommend. So I got 1180. That was my lowest PSAT score. That was in the spring of my freshman year. I got 1180 on the PSAT, and my highest SAT score was 1590, and I got that in September of my senior year. So my background. So I attended a small to mid-sized public high school. My class size is about 186. I am number one in unweighted and weighted GPA as of right now. I did not attend a private high school. It's not an incredibly competitive public high school, not even like one of the top public high schools in my state. It's just kind of a generic small to mid-sized public high school. I never had a private SAT tutor, never got private tutoring. I never bought SAT prep books, never paid for an SAT prep course, never paid for SAT prep material. I did it all for free, never bought anything, didn't spend any money to prepare for the SAT. I wasn't some math savant that was years ahead of his classmates. I took pre-calculus in my junior year of high school, along with probably about half my grade was in pre-calculus at the time, or maybe not quite half, maybe it was like a quarter, or even maybe like an eighth of my grade was in pre-calculus at the time, but nothing, I wasn't super far ahead or anything, just kind of a generic math placement at that point. So my first PSAT I scored 1190 on, and that was in the fall of my freshman year, and I actually dropped to 1180 in the spring of my freshman year when I took the PSAT again. And then I didn't study at all for either of the PSATs my freshman year. I didn't study for any of the PSATs my sophomore year either. So I went from 1180 in the spring of my freshman year to a 1280 in the fall of my sophomore year, and then to a 1350 in the spring of my sophomore year. So at no point in freshman and sophomore years did I study for the SAT, the PSAT, either one. no studying. All improvement was from coursework in my English classes and learning more math in my geometry classes, my Algebra 2 classes, both of those, some pre-calculus as well in my junior year. So I first started studying for the PSAT. I studied for the PSAT for about 1 or 2 weeks before the test. I wish that I had studied more for the PSAT because it's also the National Merit Scholarship qualifying test for your junior year. And that National Merit Scholarship qualifying test can give you big time scholarship money, like full rides, full tuition, housing, all of that if you become a National Merit finalist. So I would highly recommend studying for like 3 months before your National Merit Scholarship qualifying test, which is the PSAT in your 11th grade fall. So I highly recommend studying for that more than I did. I should have studied more. I didn't realize the amount of scholarships available based on that test. And if I would have studied for at least 3 months leading up to that test. Because if you score high and you become a National Merit finalist, you can get full rides to schools. And it's very, very, very cool, in my opinion, that you can get such big scholarships for a test like this. So highly recommend studying for that. So I got 1420 on that. I was not a National Merit finalist. I was a commendations. So I got commendations. I was not a semifinalist either. So then I started to really ramp up on my studying in December of my junior year because I thought that I would be taking the SAT in March of my junior year, but that got canceled due to COVID-19. But I studied for about 3 months before that March SAT date that I thought I was going to have, and I studied for about an hour to 2 hours a day. So it was pretty heavy studying there. And then that, like I said, March SAT got canceled. I couldn't take the SAT until August then. So basically, once my March SAT got canceled, I took a couple months, didn't study at all for the SAT, and I only started picking up again, studying for the SAT in pretty much like August 8 or August 7. So I only had about 3 weeks heading into August 29 of SAT prep, and I ended up getting 1550, but that was largely because of all the prep work that I had done in the winter of my junior year. So I would definitely recommend don't wait till 3 weeks before your SAT to start studying because that would go. I could definitely tell I was very rusty and I wasn't as good as I normally was, and from what I had done in the winter of my junior year. So then after I saw that I knew that I had gotten a couple questions wrong on August 29, I started really studying for the next 3 weeks. And then I took it again on September 23 and on September 26, and I got 1580 and then 1590. So with a perfect math score on both of those. So how did I improve my score? So improving your SAT score, it takes work and it takes dedication. So I made it a priority. I saw from my PSAT when I got 1420, and I knew that if I really wanted to improve my chances of getting into some top schools, I would have to improve my SAT score. Now that isn't to say that you can't get into a top school with a 1420, because you certainly can get into a top school with a 1420. It is just significantly harder in my opinion. So I decided to make it a priority to improve my SAT score. So I started studying in the winter of my junior year. I took practice tests and I studied what I got wrong and why, because it wasn't enough just to take the practice test. If you only take practice tests, you won't get better. You have to study what you're getting wrong and why it's wrong and why correct answers are correct. So that's what I did. I took about 10 to 16 practice tests. I don't know the exact number, but it was more than 10. Probably about, at the most, I think I probably took 16, so somewhere between 10 and 16. And I would take them, and then I would go through every question I got wrong. I would study why I got it wrong. I would study what the right answer was, and I would make sure I understood why the correct answer was correct and my answer was wrong. Then I would formulate a strategy so that next time that I saw a question like that, I wouldn't make the same mistake and I would get the answer correct and I would get it efficiently correct, which means that I wouldn't take too much time trying to figure it out, but I would be able to recognize the correct answer much faster. So I learned grammar rules. That's the other big thing. So the writing section of the SAT, you have to know your grammar rules if you want to do well on it. So I started to study grammar rules. I would go through practice tests and look at the answer explanations, see what I needed to know for the grammar rules. I would Google grammar rules, start to learn more about it. And then in addition to that, I would learn the math rules. So any sort of patterns or tricks or tips you can use on the math section to find answers faster, any sort of algebraic rules or patterns that you could find. I would study all those, make sure I knew those, so that way I could be very efficient on the math section and not miss questions. And then in addition to that, I learned, studied, practiced, and implemented reading strategies. So on the reading section, if you use certain strategies, it can help you find the right answer and avoid certain quote-unquote false answers or traps, so those sorts of things. So it can kind of help you cut through sort of the things that might be partially right but aren't completely right. So it really started to help me when I found these strategies really kind of cut down and use process of elimination, be able to get rid of answers and clearly see the right answer. So I was no longer between two answers. It was obvious that one answer was correct. And then in addition to that, I used my calculator more appropriately. And what I mean by that is on that SAT with calculator section for the math, you don't want to be using your calculator too much and you don't want to be using it too little. If you're using it too much, you're going to be wasting time when mental math may be quicker to find the right answer. And if you're using it too little, then you're not going to be using it when you should be. So like, for example, there are some big numbers that you'll have to deal with on the SAT with calculator section. And if you're doing them all by hand, then that's going to get very tedious and it's going to take a long time, whereas a calculator would be much quicker. All right, so how did I minimize costs? So I didn't spend anything in my SAT preparation, and I made sure I minimized costs because I'm kind of cheap. So I would print off the free SAT practice tests from the College Board at my high school because it takes a lot of paper and a lot of ink, and ink and paper are kind of expensive. So I would print off these practice tests at my school. I would go home on the weekends and I would take these practice tests. I would go over my right answers, make sure I understood what I got wrong. So that's one way I minimize my costs. Second way, I used Khan Academy. So if you don't know, Khan Academy has partnered with the College Board. So what that means is that the College Board and Khan Academy have worked together to create questions that are SAT-like, right? They're very similar to what you will see on the SAT because they're written from the same people who are writing the questions for the SAT. So that's a very good resource. I would recommend it. So Khan Academy, their math section for SAT prep, I would highly recommend because their math questions are very, very, very similar to what you'll see on the SAT because they're written by the same people. I would also highly recommend their reading sections because there aren't a ton of reading sections out there, and Khan Academy has reading sections that have questions written by the same people who are writing the questions for the reading sections of the SAT. Highly recommend that. I also recommend the writing sections on Khan Academy. The writing sections are very good, but there's a clause to the writing sections. The writing sections where you're given a passage and you're asked questions about the passage, I highly recommend those. Those, once again, are very accurate in the sense that they're going to be very similar to what you'll see on the SAT. There are writing sections on Khan Academy, though, where it is just one specific type of question that is asked. For example, it could be syntax. It could be sentence punctuation. Those questions I find are significantly easier than what you will see on the actual SAT and SAT practice tests. So I would recommend doing those passages and not necessarily doing those syntax or sentence punctuation short-term exercises. I would recommend the passages over that. All right, I used YouTube. Now, there isn't a ton of great SAT prep on YouTube, which is part of why I'm putting this out, because I think that what I'm putting out will be very helpful. So I would highly recommend watching my videos over the next 90 days. It'll be 1 hour a day, 1 hour lessons for the next 90 days to help you prepare for the SAT. I highly recommend that. I used YouTube in the sense that I would look up for hard SAT math problems on YouTube, things like that. Try to find challenging problems to help kind of get me to that next level. All right, next, I Googled grammar rules and definitions. Like I said, knowing grammar rules and knowing the definitions of certain types of certain words. I wouldn't stress vocabulary in your studying. I think that it's overrated, but I just mean I Googled grammar rules and definitions of, say, things like complex sentences you need to know, certain words, types of words, like nouns, verbs, subjects, all of that. You got to make sure that you have grammar rules, definitions of things down like that. All right, I researched how to improve my SAT score. So I would look at people who scored perfect on the SAT, and I would try to emulate the strategies that they proposed. So I would Google things from Prep Scholar. Prep Scholar, I believe his name is Alan Chang. He had an article on how he got a 1600 on the SAT, his recommendations and his strategies, and I would go through and look at different people who scored high on the SAT and try to find commonalities in what they all did together. Because where there's commonality there is kind of where the best strategy lies. All right, I read articles from top scorers, like I said. I wanted to see what the best of the best at the SAT did, and then I wanted to try to emulate the good parts that they did, and that's what I did. So your story with the SAT will be different from mine because we all start and end in different places. So your story is probably not going to be the same as my story. You're probably starting from a different point, higher or lower than what I started at, and you're probably going to end at a different point, higher or lower than what I started at. It's certainly possible you could score 1600, and I certainly hope that you do because that would be awesome. But it's also certainly possible you may only score a 1200. But if you started at a 1000 and now you scored a 1200, then that's good because that means that you've progressed. So don't obsess and compare yourself to me or compare yourself to other people. It has to be your own journey, and you have to focus on your progression. So if you're starting at an 800 or a 700 or a 600 or a 500, but by the end of this course you're at a 1200 or a 1300, then that's good. That means that you've progressed. If your friend starts at a 1400 and he ends with a 1410, but you started at a 1200 and now you're at a 1370, then you've progressed so much more than they have. So it's important that you don't compare yourself to others and that you just focus on your own progression, because we all start and end at different points and we all have a different educational background. All right, so my recommendations. Number one, I highly recommend that you watch Preeminent Test Preps videos. That's my channel and I highly recommend it. I have videos out from practice tests. I have practice tests 1 through 10 of SAT writing and language, practice tests 1 through 10 math no calculator. I have some practice tests with reading, some practice tests with the math with calculator section. I highly recommend watching those. I would certainly recommend this 90-day series that I'm putting out. This 90-day series I'm putting out is designed to prepare you for the SAT. It's designed to teach you everything that you're going to need to know. It's designed to teach you how to pace yourself through the SAT. It's basically designed to give you insight into what top scorers like myself look for on the SAT when they take it in order to find answers quickly, efficiently, and accurately. So it's pretty much designed to give you all of the insight that I have into this test, how to take it. I would highly recommend watching it. Next, you're going to want to take practice tests. I took between 10 and 16 practice tests. I would not necessarily say you have to take that many, but I would highly recommend taking practice tests and not only taking them, but then evaluating why your answers were wrong and why the correct answers were correct. And to do that, you can use our videos for each practice test. I have videos, like I said, on most of the practice tests, so I would highly recommend those. You can check those out on our channel. I have playlists for them. Highly recommend them. All right, number two. This is an underrated recommendation in my opinion, but I think that you need to eat healthy in your preparation and lead up to the SAT. Because if you're eating healthy, you're going to be able to focus better. And the SAT is a 3-hour test. If you're taking the essay, it's even longer than 3 hours. And you have to be able to focus during that whole time. If you start losing focus after an hour and a half, then that's going to be a problem. So you want to make sure you're eating healthy and that you're making sure that you're getting some exercise, because you have to be able to focus that whole time, right? All right. You're going to want to avoid test anxiety and trust your preparation. If you take this 90 days, this 90-day SAT series that I'm putting out, and you watch it, then you should be prepared for this test. And if you trust that preparation, then you're not going to be anxious. And if you start getting anxious, just remember that you took the time, you're prepared for the test, and that you're going to do okay. And that at the end of the day, it is just a test, and you can always take it more than once. So just trust your preparation and avoid anxiety. You have to trust yourself. If you're second guessing all of your questions, then that's going to be a problem. But it can't be a false trust, which means that you have to prepare for the SAT. If you're prepared and you enter on test day, you need to trust yourself knowing that your preparation will allow you to find the correct answer in a sufficient amount of time. Now that doesn't mean that you can just trust your gut and go through every question and not try to support it. On the reading section, you need to rely on the text. You need to go back to the text and make sure it supports your answer, because every answer on the reading section must be able to be supported by the text. So you need to trust yourself, but not overly trust yourself. Your gut will usually be right if you were prepared. If you were not prepared, you're not going to be able to trust yourself because you didn't take the time to prepare for the test. All right, so how can I help you improve on the SAT? So the number one thing to helping you improve on the SAT is the ability to recognize patterns, to use tricks, and use tips to help improve on the SAT. So here's what I mean by that. High SAT scorers, they have practiced so much that they recognize setups, patterns, and tricks that make the SAT significantly easier. There are question types that high SAT scorers have learned how to recognize, and when they see these question types, they know exactly how to approach them in order to eliminate wrong answer choices and find the right answer choice in as quickly as possible. They've gotten to the point where things are like clockwork to them. These tricks and patterns that they have learned are teachable. It took them a lot of time to recognize them, but once you recognize them, they are very easy. It makes the SAT so much easier, so much quicker. And the thing is that these tricks, setups, and patterns are teachable. That's why SAT tutoring is kind of a big business right now. Because once you learn these tricks and tips and setups, you can teach them to people. And it really helps people because they don't have to spend nearly as much time as you do studying and learning these things. That's why SAT tutors cost a lot of money, because they're good at what they do, right? And that's what I'm giving you right here, except I'm doing it for free. You don't have to pay me. So there's that. But that's what I'm going to teach you. I'm going to teach you the tricks, patterns, and setups that I've found that help me score 800 on the math section back to back, that help me score perfect on the writing section back to back, and that help me get 1590. So I'm going to be teaching you all the tricks, patterns that I look for. I'm going to be giving you insights into my brain, what I see when I see a question, what question type I believe it is, how I approach it, how I can get rid of wrong answer choices, find the right answer choice as quickly as possible. So like I said, learning these patterns and tricks without a high scoring tutor is possible, but it takes so much more time. If I had known what to look for earlier on, that would have saved me a lot of time. I would have been able to find the right answer so much quicker instead of having to take like 16 practice tests in order to find these patterns. And that's why I'm going to release this for free for a 90-day, hour-a-day test prep to help you guys, because it took me a lot longer than that to learn these things, and I want you guys to be able to learn them a lot quicker. So I'm going to be telling you all the patterns that I've found, all the tricks that I see, full insight into what I see when I see these questions and how they can help you. That way you don't have to take as much time to learn it as I did. You can have more time to spend time with your family, spend time with your friends, do other things, and not have to worry about this as much. So over the next 90 days, I'm going to do my best to teach you everything that I've learned, everything that I see, everything I look for on the SAT, things that jump out to me, things that make me say, oh, I see this pattern, I can answer this question in under 30 seconds because I've seen it before. So everything that I can do to help you improve your score, improve your life, that's what I'm going to do. My goal is to get you to be able to answer SAT questions like clockwork. I want you guys to be able to see an SAT question, say, oh, this question is asking me for this. I know this question type. I know how I'm going to approach this question, and I know how I can get to the right answer in an efficient way that isn't going to take me a lot of time. You want to be able to see a question and be happy that you see this question because you know exactly how to approach it. So that's my goal with you guys. Once you can recognize what to look for, that's when you can recognize the right answer very quickly and very accurately. Once you recognize those question types and certain setups on the math section, things become very, very easy. So that's what my goal is to teach you. So practice tests. Like I said, practice tests are very important. Part of why they're so important for the SAT is that the SAT is timed. Because the SAT is timed, your pacing matters. So you have to be able to pace on the SAT. So for 90 days, right, this is going to be a 90-day preparation series, I recommend that you take at least one practice test every 2 weeks. So you could take this on every other Saturday, starting 2 weeks from now if you're starting it on a Saturday. But either way, it's going to be every 14 days. I will upload a video directing you to take one practice test, right? So you'll have 6 total practice tests if you do one every 2 weeks for 90 days. And I think 6 practice tests is a good number. Feel free to do more if you're shooting for a score above 1400. If you're shooting for a score above 1400, it could be helpful to take more than 6 practice tests. It could. I believe you can score over 1400 with only taking 6 practice tests. I think it's certainly possible. I think you could score a perfect score with only taking 6 practice tests, but I think it would be very, very difficult. But I do think 6 practice tests is ideal if you're doing a 90-day prep series. But if you want to take more, absolutely, go ahead. Feel free to. It's not going to hurt you at all. So if you want to take more, you can. I think that if you're shooting for a score anywhere from, I'd say, 1550 below, I would say you only really need to do 6. I'd say doing any more than 6 might be excess. But of course, feel free to do it because it will help. So practice tests 5 through 10. Practice tests 5 through 10 aren't going to be used in any of the lessons that I teach until you take them as part of the schedule. So what's going to happen is 2 weeks from now, I'd upload a video saying, okay, it's probably going to be day 14, right? Because 2 weeks from now. So it'll be day 14. I'll direct you to go take practice test 5, right? So you take practice test 5, and then after that day, so starting day 15, then I would have those questions. They could be included in lessons, right? But I'm not going to include questions in lessons for practice test 5 through 10 until you've taken one of those practice tests, right? So say practice test 6, right? That would be scheduled for day 28. I wouldn't be putting questions in from practice test 6 until after day 28. So you're not going to see those questions before you take those practice tests. The next thing, take practice tests on paper unless in the future the SAT is given online. Then you need to take them online. So the theory behind this, right, is you want to practice how you're going to play. So you don't want to take the SAT online, or you don't want to take the practice SAT online if your real SAT is going to be on paper. You want to take it on paper if it's on paper, and online if it's going to be online. So historically, SATs have always been on paper, so you want to make sure you're taking the practice test on paper as well. All right, so practice tests. Like I said, you want to simulate realistic test conditions. You want to practice how you're going to play. So what that means is you need to get a good night's sleep before these practice tests, because you're going to need to get a good night's sleep before the actual SAT. You want your mind to be fresh and ready to take the practice SATs so you can get a realistic indication of where you are at. You're going to need to time each section, so make sure you're timing each section with how much time you're going to get on the real SAT. You need to make sure you're taking the practice test in a quiet space. You don't want to be distracted, right? On the real SAT, it should be quiet in your classroom. I would be surprised if it isn't. It's possible that there could be a slight noise from an air vent or something like that, but overall it would be a fairly quiet space, and you want to simulate that at home or at school or wherever you're taking the practice test. You need to take it in a desk and a chair. You can't take it in your bed laying down. You have to simulate the real thing, which is in a desk and a chair. All right, practice test order. So like I said, practice tests should be taken in the following order if you're taking the 6 that I have scheduled in for the 90-day series, which I would recommend taking at minimum 6 is what I would recommend at minimum. If you would like to take more than that, you can. I don't think it's necessary if you're shooting for a 1550 or lower. If you're shooting for anything above 1550, then I probably would recommend taking more than 6 practice tests at that point. So practice tests, if you're taking the 6 I have scheduled in the 90-day series, should be taken in the following order: 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So day 14 would be 5, day 28, 6, and then so on. On days when practice tests are scheduled, a video will be uploaded directing you to take the practice test. So on those days, there won't be a lesson for that day. It'll just be you taking the practice test, but a video will still be uploaded to tell you, hey, today's a practice test day. Go take this practice test and then go over your answers. Make sure you understand what you got wrong, all of that. So practice test evaluation. So once you've taken your practice test, now what? So like I said, taking a practice test isn't enough. There has to be more than that, right? So that means you have to answer why you got those questions that you got wrong. So what made you pick that answer? And then you have to be able to know, okay, I picked that answer because of this. Well, that was wrong. That was the wrong strategy for this question. Why is this correct answer correct? What makes this answer that the College Board says is correct? What makes it correct? What part of the text for the reading section shows it's correct? What math error did I make here? What grammar rule did I miss? What grammar rule did I not follow? You need to know why the correct answer is correct. Now, part of this is throughout this 90 days or however long you're doing your SAT prep for, you need to keep track of the questions that you get wrong. So if you want to keep track of the questions you got wrong very easily, I would highly recommend getting the College Board's SAT app. So the College Board has an SAT app that you can get, which will allow you to take a picture of your answer bubble sheet. And you can take a picture of your answer bubble sheet for your practice test, select the practice test that you took, and it will automatically grade that practice test for you. So then what it does is it takes that automatically graded practice test, and it will show you your incorrect answers and your correct answers. And it will tell you why your answers that are incorrect, and why the correct answer is correct. So that really does a lot of the hard work for you. So I highly recommend getting that app and using it to store your practice tests, because then you can go back through later on and say, okay, I've missed these questions. These are why they are right. Now I know, and I can make sure I don't miss those questions again. If you don't use the College Board's app, you need to make sure you're using a spreadsheet or a notebook or something else to keep track of the questions that you got wrong, so that way you don't miss them again. So if you get a question wrong, I would recommend writing the question out, write why you got it write what the correct answer is, and write why the correct answer is correct. So even if you're doing this through College Board's app, it might still be a good idea to handwrite those out, just so that you make sure you have it down. At minimum, with the College Board's app, make sure after you take the practice test, you go through and you analyze what the question was, why you got it wrong, what the correct answer is, and why the correct answer is correct. And like I said, it might even be a good idea to go ahead and write all of that down, even if you're using the app as well. So practice test answers. So I have videos with answer explanations for the math no calculator and the writing and language section for the first 10 SAT practice tests on my channel, as well as some reading and math calculator section answer explanations. So what I mean by this is I have a playlist of writing and language section answer explanations for all 10 SAT practice tests, so one SAT practice test 1 through 10. They're on my channel. You can go watch those. I do pretty in-depth explanations on the writing and language section. I also have that for the math no calculator section, all 10 SAT practice tests. Currently, at this moment, as of December 14, 2020, I have 4 reading section answer explanations. That's for SAT practice tests 7, 8, 9, and 10. I'll have 5 and 6 up in the next couple weeks, and I'll have 1 through 4 up in the next couple months. Math calculator section, I have 6 math calculator section answer explanations, but I have them in speed format, which means that I do it all in under 35 minutes, whereas you're given 55 minutes for the test. I'll try to upload a slowed down version of that in the next couple months as well for each of the 10 SAT practice tests. And like I said, I have that star down there, so I'll have those in-depth answer explanations for the reading and the math with calculator, hopefully by February 31 of 2021. All right, so speed on the SAT section. So like I was saying, I do have videos where I go through fairly quickly on the SAT math section to help you get a better idea of how you can improve your speed. Because some people are good with the math, they just struggle with the speed. So I put those videos out to kind of show you how you can move faster. So I do the math no calculator section in under 10 minutes, and I explain my work on that one. I can't show every step because of how quickly I'm doing it on that, but I do show most steps, and I give you a verbal explanation as I go through. So you're given 25 minutes on the math no calculator section, and I complete them in under 10. So I believe I have about 6 videos of that or something around that, and I'll probably end up doing all 10 at some point in the future. No promises though. And then I also have math with calculator section. I have, I believe, 6 videos right now where I complete that section, which normally takes 55 minutes, and I do it in under 35 minutes, and I explain my steps as I go through as well. So if you're struggling with speed, that could help you as well. And it's certainly possible I will release SAT writing speed videos, possibly reading speed videos in the future as well, but no guarantees. You can always check my channel. If it's there, you can certainly find it by clicking on Preeminent Test Prep down below in the video. Find it in our videos. All right, so it's a 13-week course because there's 91 days, so it's 12 weeks and 6 days. It's just about 13 weeks. I just call it 13 weeks. So the first 2 weeks, they're going to be designed to introduce and teach the concepts, equations, and rules that you need to know to be successful on the SAT. So what I mean by that is for math, you need to know certain math equations. You need to know math concepts. You need to know some shapes. You need to know some geometry rules for those shapes. You need to know some trigonometry. So you need to know those things first before you can answer those questions. So the first 2 weeks, it's going to be designed for me to teach you all of the math information that you should need to know. The exception, the writing section. So the writing section in weeks 1 through 2, I'm going to be teaching you grammar rules, but that's going to take longer than weeks 1 through 2. The writing section has a lot of rules and a lot of concepts for grammar that you need to know, and it's probably going to take more like about 5 weeks for you to learn all of that. So that first 5 weeks for the writing section is going to be focused on teaching you grammar rules, punctuation, all of that, words that sound the same, homophones, everything. So that first 5 weeks on the writing section is going to be focused on teaching you, whereas for math, I can probably teach most of it in the first 1 to 2 weeks. Same with reading, first 1 to 2 weeks primarily. All right, so then weeks 3 to 6. So weeks 3 to 6 for the math, we would be doing practice problems that are going to implement those equations I taught you in weeks 1 through 2. So all the equations I taught you in weeks 1 through 2, we're going to be practicing implementing them with practice problems in weeks 3 through 6. For writing, like I said, at that point, we'd be finishing up learning grammar rules, learning punctuation rules, learning how to differentiate words, all of that. Subject, verb, agreement, all of that is going to be weeks 3 through 6. We're going to continue, probably wrap up around week 5. Week 6, start practicing a little bit. For reading, in week 3, you'll be taking a diagnostic test, which means that you're going to be determining whether speed is your problem or accuracy is your problem on the reading section. For some people, reading is not, it's tough to do it fast. I get it. I'm not a fast reader either. I had to work on it. So it's really going to be working on finding out if accuracy is your problem with the reading section, which some people it is. Some people, they read really fast and their accuracy isn't great, and some people, they read really slow but they're very accurate. So it'll be kind of diagnosing where you're at in that, and then providing tips and practice for both types of people on how to improve there. So weeks 7 through 8 and 9, now we get into the pacing, right? So at this point, we've covered the material that you need to know to be successful, and we've kind of started implementing that in practice problems. So now we've done the practice problems. Now we start to worry about speed because the SAT is a timed test, right? So weeks 7 through 8 and 9, we focus on pacing, right? And that should say pacing tricks and tips will be taught, not ticks. So we're going to teach you how to pace, right? So for example, on the math section, we're going to teach you how to pace for the no calculator and how to pace for the math with calculator. We're going to teach you how to pace with the math for the writing section and for the reading section. So we're going to break things down into pacing, show you how fast you should be going, where you need to speed up, where you need to slow down, where you need to, how to determine kind of how much time you have left, where you're at, everything to do with pacing, practicing pacing, me walking you through things, walkthroughs to demonstrate how I pace on the SAT since I scored 1590, 2 800s back to back, 2 perfect writings back to back, kind of showing you how to demonstrate pacing, how I pace, how you should pace, different ideas on pacing. Weeks 7 through 8 and 9, all about pacing. And then weeks 9 through 11 are designed to get you to be efficient and polished. So when you get through weeks 9 through 11, you're going to start to be at the point where you start to recognize question types. And these questions are going to be a little bit more difficult, but you're going to start to feel confident, recognize the question types, and know your process and your strategy to go after those questions. So at that point, you start to really feel in control of the SAT and not like the SAT is in control. You want to be able to control that test, right? You want to be able to attack the questions. You see the question, you say, okay, I know my strategy here. I know what I need to do. I'm going to implement this strategy, and that's going to get me the correct answer in a very quick manner. So that's going to be what weeks 9 through 11 are about, all about becoming very efficient, very polished. We're working with a little bit more difficult questions, but we're doing them in a very efficient manner. Patterns and setups by week 11. Week 11 is probably where you're going to start seeing these patterns and setups, and they're going to jump out to you, and it's really going to start to click for you. You're going to see the patterns, you're going to see the setups, it's going to click for you. You're going to be like, okay, I know how to attack this question. I know exactly what it's asking me to do, and then you're going to go ahead and do it. Weeks 12 to 13. So week 13, the end of week 13 would be when your SAT would be if you're doing this in a 90-day lead up to your SAT. So you're going to want to be staying sharp with practice problems in week 12. Week 12 is going to be about making sure, okay, we know how to do everything, we can do it efficiently, just kind of staying sharp, staying ready, because we've learned everything at that point. We've gotten our pacing down at that point. We've decided on a strategy at that point. It's just going to be staying sharp with practice problems, making sure we're getting things correct. And then in week 13, at that point, we start reviewing. So week 13, we are 1 week before our SAT. We are reviewing all of our math equations, making sure we have those memorized. We are reviewing our grammar rules, making sure we have those memorized. We are making sure that we know our reading strategies and our reading tricks, our reading question types. We know that we need to have a reading strategy going into that SAT. We need to know in what order we're going to do our passages. We need to know in what order we're going to do everything with the reading section. We need to have our strategy memorized. We need to go in prepared for that reading section. So all final reviews, making sure we have everything down, fully prepared, and we're sharp. All right, so that's going to take you through the end of the course, but we need to understand how the SAT is scored before we start preparing for it. If we're going to prepare for a test, we need to know how that test is going to be scored. All right, I'm about to probably drop a truth bomb on you right here. So, truth bomb being metaphorical, not actual explosives involved, for clarification and legal purposes. Okay, so understanding how the SAT is scored. The SAT, it's not 25, 25, 25. Most people would think math with calculator is 25, math without calculator is 25%, the other 25% is writing, other 25% is reading. That is not correct. That is a fallacy. It's false. The truth is that the math with calculator section is worth about 1/3 of the entire test. And here's why. The math sections, you get a score out of 800. That score out of 800 is determined by your combined math score between your with calculator and your without calculator. Now what that means is that there are 38 questions on the calculator section. There are 20 questions on the without calculator section. That gives you a total of 58 questions. Now how your math section score is determined is it's determined by the sum, right? So it's how many questions you got right out of 58. So how many questions you got right out of the 58. It doesn't break down and split between with calculator and without. So what that means then is that 38 out of 58 questions are on that math with calculator section, and that means 32.76% of your SAT is your math with calculator. And that means only 17% of your SAT is your math without a calculator. So what that means is we need to be studying more for our math with calculator section than our math without calculator section. Now, the writing section and the reading section, they are very simple. So it's going to be 400 points for your writing section and 400 points for your reading section. You can't get more than 400 in either section, right? So you're going to have 400 points reading, 400 points reading, 400 points writing, and it's not going to be, they don't affect each other. Whatever you get in one will not affect what you get in the other. They will be summed to get your 800 English reading and writing score. So how this impacts how I'm going to teach. Well, if 32.76% of the SAT is the math with calculator, then 32.76% of what I teach will be math with calculator because I want to maximize your chances at scoring points. So what this means is that 40 minutes out of the 1 hour I teach a day, every other day, will be spent on the math with calculator section. So that means about 1/3 of the time that I spend teaching will be on the math with calculator section. That means that 20 minutes every other day, I will teach the math without calculator section because that is 17% of the SAT. Now, since the writing and reading sections are each worth 25% of the SAT, I'll spend an average of 30 minutes every other day on each of those. So what it's going to look like in a typical week is, say in 1 week, so every day, regardless of the week, you will have 40 minutes on one day of SAT math with calculator. The next day, you will have 20 minutes of math without the calculator. So each day, you're going to have a math, whether it's with calculator or without calculator, and then you're going to have either reading or writing. So let's say that we had math with calculator one day, and that was 40 minutes. Then we would do 20 minutes of SAT writing that day. Then the next day, we would do 20 minutes of math without calculator and 40 minutes of reading. And we would continue to do that for 1 week. And then the next week, we would switch the reading and writing so that, say, writing was 20 minutes for every other day the previous week, it would now be 40 minutes. And reading would go from 40 minutes to 20 minutes. So they're going to average 30 minutes every other day. All right. So another thing to note is the easiest sections to improve on. So the reading section is going to be the hardest section for you to improve on. And there's a couple reasons for this. So the reading section, a lot of reading, right? It's developed over a very, very long time period. So ever since you were like young and your parents read to you, all the way through now you're in high school, or if you're taking the SAT in 8th grade, which some people do, I never even considered, but reading, it's the hardest one for you to improve on. Your reading comprehension, it takes a long time to develop. It's going to be kind of difficult for you to really change how good of a reader you are in 90 days. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't improve your reading score because a lot of the reading section isn't just if you're a good reader. It's about strategies. So you can still improve your reading score. That's absolutely, absolutely possible. You can definitely improve your reading score, but you will be better able to improve your math and writing scores because those are simply memorizing rules. So the reading section, it's a lot of strategizing. And the math and writing, it's a lot of memorizing rules. And there is definitely strategy in math and writing as well. Don't get me wrong. There's very much strategy in everything on the SAT. But the reading section is harder to improve on and improve your score on. So by the end of the course, hopefully you have seen an improvement from your PSAT or from your first SAT practice test. That is what the goal is, right? The whole goal of you spending 90 days for an hour a day with me studying for this SAT is that you improve, right? You want to see an improvement from your PSAT and an improvement from your first practice test so that you can get a better SAT score, improve your chances of getting into college, improve your chances at scholarships, hopefully get a nice scholarship, right? Lots of merit scholarship money, be able to go to school, save money, not go into debt, all of that good stuff. But there's a second part, right? The second part is, yes, you're studying for a standardized test. That standardized test, though, it does have some important skills. Not everything on the SAT is just about the SAT, right? You are going to be learning math. Math is important. There are certain parts, algebra on this SAT test, that are very important in life. You need to be able to know how to solve for like two variables. If you have an X and a Y, it is helpful to know how to solve that using algebra. For writing, it's helpful to know how to use proper grammar. If you're writing a resume, it's helpful to know how to write a good resume with proper grammar. You don't want to be using the wrong there on a resume. That looks bad. And then reading. You're probably going to be reading the rest of your life. It's good to know how to read. It's good to know how to comprehend what you're reading, and good to know how to apply it. So hopefully all of those things improve and your skills with those improve as a result of this course. That would be fantastic. So it's not only about preparing you for the SAT, it's also about preparing you for life and all of that. But yeah, definitely we're still going to focus on improving your SAT score. And the side effect of that is that your math, writing, and reading will improve as a result. So that's a nice little side effect. All right, so what you're going to need for the next 90 days. What will you need for this 90-day SAT series? Well, I would recommend that you have number 2 pencils, because that is what you'll be using on the SAT. So if you don't have number 2 pencils and you can afford them, I would recommend buying them, or if you can ask someone at your school for them, I would recommend it. If you don't have number 2 pencils, you can use a different writing utensil. You can't use a different writing utensil on the SAT, but just for practice and writing in your notebook, you can, but I would still recommend using number 2 pencil. You're going to need 2 notebooks. That's my recommendation to you. If not 2 notebooks, you're going to need a binder with paper. I would recommend 2 notebooks because you'll need one for notes and one for practice problems. So I would certainly prefer you have 2 notebooks over a binder with paper. You're also going to need a calculator, right? There's a math with calculator section. Now, all questions in the math with calculator section can be answered without a calculator, but that doesn't mean that they should. Having a calculator is important on the SAT math with calculator section because there are big numbers. There are big numbers that you're going to have to divide and multiply, and doing those by hand will waste time. We don't want to waste time on the SAT. I would recommend having a graphing calculator. Graphing calculators available that I know of are TI-84 and the TI-83. If you want to save money, the TI-83 you can usually find used for about $50. I know that the TI-84 brand new as of right now, which is December 14 of 2020, TI-84's new costs about $100. So if you want to save money, you can get a TI-83 used for about $50. I've heard of people finding them at Goodwill for about $20. I don't know if that's true or not, but you can certainly check. Water, yes, water. Water, very important. You need water to live. You also need water to do well on the SAT, because if you're dehydrated, then you're not going to do as well on the SAT because your brain will not function as well. So make sure you're drinking water throughout your preparation leading up to the SAT as well, because we want our brains to remember what we're learning, and part of that is being hydrated. So I'm a big water guy. I believe in water. You should too. Make sure you're drinking water. Next, you're going to need a journal or another notebook. Or you can use notes on your phone because this isn't really a huge part of it. But I would still recommend having a journal or another notebook. So basically, at the end of each lesson, which is about an hour, so say at 58 minutes or even just after I'm done talking, I would recommend that you write down a couple sentences or a couple notes just saying what you learned, what you're going to apply when you take your next practice test or when you take the SAT, and what kind of strategy you liked, what worked for you, what you're looking forward to using on your next practice test or SAT. It doesn't have to be an essay, but just a little bit of notes at the end of each lesson so you remember what you did. Next, you're going to need confidence and faith that you will improve. If you're not a confident person, then you need to make sure you're preparing so you are confident. You don't want to be second guessing yourself on the SAT because it will waste time. You want to make sure that when you answer a question, you're confident because you prepared. You can't have blind faith. You have to have faith because of your preparation, and then that confidence makes it so you can answer a question and know, okay, I was prepared, I used my strategy, this is the correct answer, and I know it because I spent 3 months, 90 days preparing for this, and I'm ready. You need to have a positive self-image. Understand that even if you're starting at a 700, a 600, a 400, a 500, an 800, 1,000, 1,400, you can improve. Everyone can improve unless you got a 1,600, which not many people get. You have to understand that it takes time to improve. You may not see results in the first 3 practice tests, but then maybe on your 4th, 5th, or 6th one, you absolutely blow it out of the water and you improve by 200 points. You just don't know. You have to understand that things take time and that you will get better if you continue to work hard. Next, you have to believe in yourself. You have to understand that you can do it. You might not get a perfect score. Not everyone does, but you can improve. Everyone can improve, right? You just got to work hard. You got to believe in yourself. Understand things might take time, but as a result of preparation, you will be more prepared for the SAT, and that will improve your chances at doing better. All right, an underrated item you need. This is something not a lot of people talk about with the SAT, but that should really be talked about because it's very important. You need to have a watch, and this isn't something where you need to have it because they won't let you in the test center if you don't have it. This is something where you need to have it because if you don't and there's no clock in the room, you have no way of keeping track of time. And like I said, the SAT is a timed test, and pacing is very important. So you need to make sure you have a watch. Now here's the thing about watches. It has to be an old-fashioned non-digital watch for the SAT. They will not let you have a watch that is digital that can make noise. It cannot make noise. It cannot be digital. It has to be old-fashioned. So the kind of watch where you pull out that thing on the side to change the time, that's the kind you should be looking for, and make sure it can't make noise. It doesn't have capabilities of working with phones. You need to have an old-fashioned watch. So here's what I recommend and what I did. I would set it to noon before each section. So I'd set it to 12, and then section starts, I start my watch. That way I can keep track of time. Plus, by doing that, it's less likely that you will confuse your minute and your hour hand because your minute hand will be far ahead of your hour hand on every section other than the reading section because the reading section is over an hour. But even then, at that point, once it gets down to like that last 5 minutes, you'll be able to tell. So I would recommend setting it to noon before every section. That's the best way to do it. All right, know how to read it, right? It's an old-fashioned watch. If you don't know how to read an old-fashioned watch, make sure you know how to read it. That's important. Don't forget it on test day. When I got my 1590, I actually forgot my watch. And it wasn't really like I forgot it like the day of. It was that I was using my dad's watch because I didn't have an old-fashioned one, and he went out of town. So if you don't have your own watch, you need to make sure that you're planning ahead like a week or two in advance for whoever's watch you're going to borrow. Make sure that you have it like in your possession because you do not want to lose it. So that's a word to the wise there. I got saved because there was a clock in my room, but there's not going to be a clock in every SAT testing room. And if there's not a clock, then you're in big trouble. So make sure that you have a watch. Also, make sure you're practicing with the watch that you're going to use. You want to make sure that you know how to adjust it. You want to make sure that it's keeping track of time accurately. Make sure you practice with it on your practice tests. All right, organization. So staying organized in your SAT prep, it's important. Like I said, I would highly recommend the College Board's app because it will store your practice tests, store the answers you got right, store the answers you got wrong, store your improvement. I highly recommend it. It's a very, very good way of keeping organized, and you will always have it on you that way as well. If you ever find time on the bus or in the car to study, it's always with you. All right, next, 2 notebooks. So like I said, 2 notebooks, one for notes and one for practice problems. So you're going to have one notebook where you're going to put any notes, right? So anything like the equations I start out with in weeks 1 through 2, any sort of test taking tips, any pacing tips, any tricks, any setups that I see, all of that would go in the notebook. And then practice problems would be the other notebook. So the other notebook would be practice problems. So say math problems that I show you, all of those would go in the practice problems notebook. So you might need more than 2 by the end of the 90 days because practice problems can take up more space for some people, less for others. It's possible you might need to pick up a second notebook in addition to the one for practice problems. So a total of 3 or 4. It's certainly possible. Include dates in both your notebooks so that way you can see the practice problems that correspond to the date of the notes. So you can relate your notes to the practice problems that we do. And then you're going to need one journal or notebook or notes on your phone just for that last 2 minutes of class or 3 minutes or after I say class is done, just to go ahead and put down what you learned, strategies, all of that. All right, so remember to register for the SAT. This is kind of obvious, but also not. So seats are going to fill up for these SAT testing centers quicker than you think. So make sure that you're registering early because if you don't register early, you're probably not going to be able to find a test site that's close to you and you might have to go pretty far out of your way. For example, I waited too long to sign up for my SAT and I had to drive over an hour away to go take it. So I would recommend that you sign up early because seats will fill faster than you think and you want to find a place close to home so you don't have to drive as far because the test starts at 8 a.m. and if you have to drive 3 hours and your test starts at 8 a.m., you got to get up at like 4 because you got to get there at like, I believe it's like 7:30 or 7:45 is when doors open for you to get in. So definitely recommend registering as early as you can once you're sure you're going to take it. And there is a late fee if you wait too long, and if you wait past the late registration date, you can't sign up at all. So definitely make sure you're registering early. All right, so additional support. Alright, so this is kind of just check the description in this video for the following if you want it. So a donation link. So I'm making these videos. I'm not getting paid for them. So if you want to donate to me, that would be fantastic. I would really appreciate it. They take a lot of work, a lot of time preparation. It took me a lot of time to prepare for the SAT and recognize all the things that I'm teaching you for free. You know, there's definitely a lot of private tutors out there that charge a lot. I'm not doing that. I'm doing this for free. If my videos help you and you can afford it, I'd certainly appreciate it. It's not required to watch the videos. The videos are going to be free, but I would definitely appreciate any financial contributions. Private SAT tutoring opportunities. I'm releasing this 90-day prep regardless. It's going to be free. I'm going to leave it up for as long as YouTube will let me for free. So I'm going to leave that up. But if you want additional tutoring beyond that 90-day thing and beyond anything else I have up on my channel, if I'm doing that, that'll be linked in the description. That could be one-on-one groups, etc. If I'm doing it, link would be in the description. Academic consulting. If I'm doing anything with college essays as far as reading them, providing advice on them, proofreading them for grammar, anything like that, that will be in the description. Any application advice that I'm giving would be in the description. Any Common App advice, all of that would be in the description. Anything to do with college applications, the college application process, all of that, extracurriculars, anything to do with academic consulting, all of those links would be in the description. So day 2 is tomorrow. It's going to be uploaded on December 15 of 2020, and we will actually start getting into SAT preparation with lessons. We will be doing math. I'll start teaching you the math equations you need to know, how to, not really how to apply them. We're going to be saving that till after you kind of learn more of the equations. So it's really just going to be teaching you the equations, what they mean, how to interpret math equations, and then we'll also be getting into some grammar rules, so you kind of be learning your writing. So tomorrow is going to be a math day with writing. For your first week, math with calculator and without calculator are just going to be combined into just math because it's just teaching you equations and what you need to know to be successful in the math section, apart from the no calculator or with calculator. You have to know that for both sections. So the first week is just going to be math together, and then it'll be writing and reading are going to be every other day. Math would be every day as well, though. So thank you for watching. If there's anything in the description you want to check out, go ahead and check out. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share. If you want, you can donate. The link will be in the description when it's up. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Thank you for watching Preeminent Test Prep. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share as we will be releasing more videos to help you prepare for the SAT.